It kind of reminds me of Radio America, you know, where they would broadcast the messages to everybody, so everybody was getting the information that maybe wasn't making its way down the wire. So you're like the Freedom
Right.
Network.
Yes, the Crusader, sure.
Nice.
All right, it's 11 o'clock. I see Angela's there with her smile too, and a different background. You must be in the office, Angela. All right. So welcome everyone to Bar Talk, May 27, 2020. And it's 11 o'clock, so we're going to get started. One of the things that I wanted to bring up before we introduce our guests was that Angela and I did have a discussion with Amy Quinlan, the Director of Communications for the Judicial Branch yesterday. It was a meeting about brainstorming ideas on how to roll out electronic filing. And the clear message that she was sending us that I just wanted to share with you is that the court is moving ahead with their electronic filing schedule and still plans on Penobscot County being the initial area to start with electronic filing. There may be some tweaking on what types of cases are at the very beginning, but they're working on that at the Judicial Branch, and they're looking for any input that our organization might have. So please feel free to chat it up here on Bar Talk or to send us an email on any thoughts you might have about that. I do want to remind you that the court is still seeking input on its new rules related to electronic filing, and you can find that link to being able to review those rules on the Judicial Branch website. And Angela, did we create a link for that too?
It is available on our website, and we also sent out a blast to everybody with the information.
Thank you. And so one of the things we're asking too is whatever feedback you may decide to send directly to the court, please just copy us so we have kind of an overview of what it is that's going to them, and we can jump on that bandwagon or you know, all of the above help in some way. And one other thing, I think I mentioned earlier that the Maine Trial Lawyers Association has reached out to us to help essentially piggyback on what concerns their constituents have that they would like the Judicial Branch to act on sooner than later in the form of either emergency order or permanent order. One of those was signing documents in some electronic format without a wet signature, and they forwarded us some ideas with that in that regard. I don't see why we wouldn't back something like that, but if you have any thoughts at all on it, and again, I discussed the pros about that yesterday. If you have any thoughts on that, please just send us your thoughts via chat or email. The other item is there is a push for by the MTLA for making remote depositions the default. In other words, if you want an in-person deposition, you would actually have to motion for it unless it was agreed on by opposing counsel. So I thought that was an interesting request, and any thoughts on that, please let us know what they are. All right, with that, we do have our guest, District Attorney Andrew Robinson, with us. And I really appreciate you joining us, Andy. And we're really curious about how your district is doing in the COVID-19 pandemic and how you see your office rolling out. Andy, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me join you this morning. District 3 has a combination of a sort of a busy, sort of more urban court in the Lewiston, Auburn area, and then we have the rural offices in Oxford and Franklin. So the rollout is a little bit different in each sort of type of category. But what we are seeing in our office is that we are doing more in the way of remote work. We're doing a lot of dispositional conferences via video. We have been doing in custody arraignments and motions to amend bail. That's all been done by video. We're doing probation violation hearings by video or remotely. And we are now graduating to the point, all of those have been focused on folks that are in custody, which are obviously given priority. But now we're starting to pay attention and focus on the backlog of cases where the individuals that were summoned or that have cases pending are not in custody. And so we're starting to work with the court and the local defense bar on trying to coordinate remote dispositional conferences for those cases and scheduling them with the clerks. We're also working on a pilot project with the court, with MacDill, and with the commission to see if we can get court-appointed counsel for those folks who have a risk of jail, as well as maybe some kind of limited appointment of counsel for folks prior to coming in for their arraignment dates, which would allow us to start getting out discovery and extending offers to individuals before they even have to come in the courthouse and start making progress on the backlog of cases that has built up, you know, because of the cessation of certain activities like the walk-in arraignments and the dispositional conferences for folks that aren't in custody. So we've been moving in a direction to try to figure out ways that we can use technology.
Andy, I was just saying that's a great idea. I was saying that pilot project sounds like a great idea.
Well, and you know, I got to make sure it's clear that this is a brainchild of folks at the Commission, you know, for Indigent Legal Services. It has been supported by members of MacDill, by the MPA, the Maine Prosecutors Association, and the court, which worked very hard to be creative and figure out different ways to do things differently than we used to. Well, we've all been meeting on it. And so, yeah, we're excited about it. Still has, you know, a few sort of procedural steps that need to take place before we can initiate it, but we're right on the cusp of starting that program. And then sitting in the background, the counties, you know, and I have 3 of them, are starting to work towards opening up the courthouses and the county offices. And so the administrator part of me is spending an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out what level of cleaning that needs to occur within the offices. How do I get the protective personal equipment so that folks are comfortable and safe when they're working in the office? And then what kind of new rules we have to have in place that account for the social distancing and, you know, without becoming too awkward when you're dealing with your colleagues and working in an environment you're used to working in pretty liberally, and now there's going to be some restrictions. So it's a lot of sort of rethinking the way we do things in light of the virus. We're also talking with the court about restarting the grand jury process in District 3. We haven't had a grand jury meet since March. And so the court is working to get that back on track in a way that's safe for the grand jurors that we're asking to come in. But those cases are starting to backlog, so we want to get that process beginning. And then always we have an eye towards trying to get the jury trial started up again, although I don't know that anybody has a clear-cut plan on how we get a large body of citizens into the same room so we can go through that jury selection process. I don't know that we have the answer to that yet. We're still working on it.
I appreciate that, Andy, letting us know what's happening in your district, which is vast for sure. But in particular, are you being tasked at all by the courts with any responsibility of keeping the courtrooms themselves sanitized? I know that you know, during arraignments or any type of hearings that you may be involved with regarding a defendant or defendants, that you generally have a lot of people that come into the courtroom. And I know that right now you probably aren't having anyone come in the courtroom, but I know in June things are going to start rolling out. And I was curious if the judicial branch has talked to you about that transition, as well as your participation in keeping courtrooms either sanitized or spaced out in numbers of people.
Yeah, that's a great question. A part of the protective equipment that we think about is making sure that we have, you know, the sufficient sort of disinfectant, you know, Clorox wipes, things that we can use for our personal space, that when we're used in the courtroom and we're you know, using the equipment, that we can then wipe it down so that the next person that has to use it is safe. We're also, I think our greatest contribution to trying to limit the exposure of folks that are coming into the court process is limiting the number of people that are in the courtroom. And that involves, you know, I had worked pretty hard prior to the outbreak on getting so that our staff could work in the courtroom and work remotely from our office, so that we weren't entering information or writing information on a file and then having to re-enter it into the system. We were trying to do it all while in the courtroom. And so, you know, in some sense, that effort to put more people in the courtroom to be more efficient may not work in a courtroom where we're trying to limit the number of people. Although that same effort made it easier for us to work remotely when we made the decision that we couldn't have everybody coming into the offices. So it's been sort of a double-edged sword. But so we need to think about how many people we're going to be putting in the courtroom, and if they're in the courtroom and they're using the equipment, you know, how we're going to make sure that we make it so that anybody that comes behind us feels safe and feels comfortable. So yeah, that's part of the discussions we're having. The actual cleaning crews, which I've seen going through the court, that's been coordinated by the judicial branch, and they've obviously made that a high priority.
Got it. Yeah, I had the privilege of going to court for the first. Oh, yep. We'll get there in a second, George. I had the pleasure of going into the courthouse for the first time in 2 months last Friday, and yep, and it was the cleaning crews were quite proficient. I was impressed. They just constantly were going through the courthouse and cleaning. So, George, yes, what's your question?
Yeah.
Well, I want to comment to several things. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
I just want to comment on a few things that Andy brought up. First, as a defense attorney with multiple people incarcerated, I want to comment on 3 areas that have concerning procedures that have been taking place in Androscoggin County, specifically in District Court 8. First, I'll say that I've been able to work cooperatively and congenially with the team, Andy's team. They've been very responsive to emails and discussions. They've been very helpful in moving things along. The video conferences for in-custody bail reviews and dispos have gone very well. I've also been pleased to see the cooperation I've had from his team in getting several people into treatment programs on bed-to-bed type amendments to bails. So I appreciate that, Andy. Your team has done a really good job. working with defense counsel's problems with people incarcerated. As far as the pilot program, before it was implemented, I'd hoped that the local bar, our local bar, could have some insight as to what the details would be and some comments on it. I don't always agree that MACTL speaks for me. I often have disagreements with them on a number of issues. They speak in general for members of their bar. I am a member, but not other defense counsels are not members. So I would not like to have MACTL have the final word on the defense counsel's concerns or questions about the pilot program, which sounds like a good program. I would certainly
Yeah.
be in favor of a non-custodial dispo conferences. I don't have any problems with that. As far as jurors coming in, obviously the court, the judiciary will control that. My concern is not allowing them to limit the numbers or to bring people in at a time when they will be upset about being exposed to possible medical problems. I'm sure the court will be very sensitive about that, and I'm sure you will too, because you're people at risk too. That's all I wanted to say, and thank you, Thaddeus.
You got it. Thank you, George. Andy,
Thank
we
you.
do kind
Well,
of have to wrap. We do kind of have to wrap up. I wanted to have some final words for you if you had a response. Go ahead.
Very quickly, the next step in the process is for the folks coordinating that project to touch base with the local defense counsel. They made it very clear in the meeting that just happened yesterday that that's the next step, and they're going to be doing that. So George is right on point, and he's right to be concerned about. And then we share his concerns about how we're going to be bringing in jurors and how we're going to be selecting jury panels. And so George is going to be a part of that process, I'm sure, in trying to come up with ideas to do it. It's ultimately going to be the judicial branch. But finally, I just want to point out, George is one of my favorite tech people. Every time we come up with a novel advancement, trying to find ways to use technology, it always feels like he's a little bit ahead of us, and he's certainly receptive to it. So he was more equipped for this pandemic than most, I'll tell you that.
Well, that's excellent. And I'm glad to hear that, Andy. And I just wanted to say it's of course, we appreciate what you're doing up there in your district. And thanks for coming on Bar Talk as a fellow classmate of yours. I'm proud of you, Andy.
I was hoping you'd bring that up. I didn't want that sitting in the shadows. It's great seeing you. Thank you for letting me join you.
You got it. Angela, and you're welcome to stay on. We got like one more minute. Angela, what do you have to share with us on the business side?
I don't have much to share. You already covered the e-filing rollout, so obviously MSBA will be staying on top of that. We've got good working relationship with the judicial branch. So be on the lookout for us to be working with them to help that process and provide some CLEs and so forth, information CLEs. You'll see we got a good lineup coming up. Dean Softly's tomorrow, Aria should be on Friday, and Justice Meade on Monday. And then we have Chief Judge Levy from the U.S. District Court joining us the following Monday. And we'll talk a little bit more about it when we have more time, but it looks like we're going to Mondays only for Bar Talk starting in June. We'll give you a little bit more information on a day when we have a little more time.
All right. Thank you very much, Angela. I just wanted to throw out there a shout out for the birds. In this last 2 months, I've certainly learned a lot about birds, and in particular, we've been privy to having goldfinch or yellow finches, maybe you call it, and tanagers that have visited us and eaten from our bird feeders, which are absolutely beautiful in the spring. I didn't know this, but they molt, and in the fall, they're a different color. So if you get to see those birds, then you will know how beautiful our nature can be. All right, that being said, I look forward to any comments you have as discussed. See you tomorrow.